Hollywood, it's a
Yeah.
place of dreams, glamour. But, and this is a big but, sadly, it also has some very dark shadows. And few stories really embody that darkness quite like the one we're diving into today, the Black Dahlia murder. You send over an article with, like, all the details, and wow, even after all these years, this case, it stays with you.
It's fascinating, right? The Black Dahlia case, it takes that whole facade of Hollywood, the glitz, the allure, and just smashes it against this brutal, unsolved murder. You've got Elizabeth Short, this young woman, arrives in L.A. in the 40s,
Yeah.
and she's yearning for the silver screen, but then her life's tragically short.
It's a story that everyone's been talking about for decades, right?
Mhm.
And that name, the Black Dahlia, it just adds to the mystery, don't you think? Sounds like, I don't know, an old film noir. Though I think I read that the nickname might have had more to do with the newspapers wanting a juicy story. Not really about Elizabeth herself.
Yeah, that's really important to remember, especially as we, go deeper. The way the media portrayed Elizabeth Short, it definitely changed how everyone saw the case. But before we get into all that, let's go back to January 47, the discovery of her body. It shook Los Angeles to its core.
And to think, someone just stumbled upon that. A scene like that, it's chilling.
Yeah, so it was a woman, Betty Bersinger, who found her, walking with her daughter near Lambert Park, and she sees what she thinks is a mannequin, just lying there in a vacant lot. Imagine that moment when she realizes, oh, it's not a mannequin. It's Elizabeth Short.
I don't even want to try to imagine that. And it wasn't just a body, it sounds like it was a whole, I don't know, a staged thing.
Exactly. Someone had posed Elizabeth Short's body, it's almost theatrical the way they describe it, bisected at the waist, drained of blood, completely clean. And then the killer carved this awful grin into her face. They call it a Glasgow smile.
Yeah, see, that's the kind of detail that sticks with you, even if you don't want it to. And no blood at the scene, that tells you something right there. Premeditation, that's really unsettling.
Absolutely. No blood, and investigators knew this wasn't where it happened. Elizabeth Short was murdered somewhere else. Her body was moved, posed in that lot. And of course, as soon as word got out, the media, they were everywhere.
Oh, I bet. Gruesome murder, aspiring actress, Hollywood. Talk about a media frenzy waiting to happen.
You got it. Newspapers, they loved it. Every little detail, whether it was true or not, about Elizabeth Short plastered right on the front page. She was a femme fatale, they said, a temptress in the city of angels. And that image, it stuck, even now.
It's like people forgot about the real Elizabeth Short, the woman behind the headlines.
And that is exactly why we need to step back from all the hype, all the sensationalism, and look at Elizabeth Short, the person. Because behind the nickname, behind that horrific death, she was a young woman. Like so many others, she came to Hollywood chasing a dream.
A dream that was cut way too short. But to understand the tragedy, we need to understand her life. So let's do it. Let's delve into that.
Absolutely. Let's peel back those layers, the myths, the media hype, and try to see the woman behind the Black Dahlia. That's where it starts. You have to start with Elizabeth Short herself.
It's easy to get caught up in all that, all the darkness, right? But you're right. Elizabeth Short was a real person with her own life, her own hopes, just like anyone. So before Hollywood, what was her life like?
Well, she was born in 1924, and right away, hardship, The Great Depression was in full swing, and her family, they really struggled like so many others. But she had this dream, this vision of Hollywood. So mid-1940s, she arrives in L.A. But you got to remember, Hollywood back then, nothing like it is today. This was post-war, the studio system was everything. Tough for anyone trying to break in, let alone a young woman like Elizabeth.
I can imagine. Talk about a recipe for, well, for dreams, sure, but also a lot of heartbreak, I'd guess. So did she have any success in those early days, I mean?
It's almost like a story you've heard before, even now in Hollywood. She wanted to be a star, but steady work, hard to come by. She did what she could, posing for photos, hoping some big shot would notice her. And yeah, I think there were a few small acting gigs here and there, but nothing nothing major. She was living hand to mouth, relying on friends, moving around a lot.
It adds another layer of sadness to it all,
Oh,
This young woman comes to this city, so much hope, and then this happens. It's hard to process.
And it makes you think, someone in her shoes just trying to find her way, it'd be easy to become, well, vulnerable in a city like L.A.
Especially back then. You hear stories about the golden age of Hollywood, but it was a dark time too, right? I mean, organized crime, all of those secrets. Which brings us to the suspects in Elizabeth Short's case. Your article mentions a bunch, and the theories. All over the place. Where do we even start?
It's true. The number of suspects, the theories. That's
Yeah.
a big reason this case still grabs people. So many possibilities, each one more, I don't know, more intriguing and disturbing than the last. But let's start with a name that always seems to come up. Dr. George Hodel.
Right, the LA physician. The thing that gets me is his own son claimed he did it.
Yeah, that's what makes Hodel so fascinating in all this. Steve Hodel, his son, he was a homicide detective with the LAPD, and he was convinced. He even wrote a whole book about it, Black Dahlia Avenger. Lays out his whole theory, all the supposed evidence against his own father.
Hold on, a homicide detective investigating his own dad for the Black Dahlia murder. That sounds like, I don't know, a movie plot or something? What kind of evidence are we talking about?
Well, Steve Hodel pointed to a few things. First, his dad was a doctor, right?
Right.
The way they found Elizabeth Short's body, it wasn't just gruesome, it was precise. Like, some experts said you'd need anatomical knowledge to do that, the kind of knowledge a doctor like Hodel would have.
Okay, that is creepy. Too creepy.
Wow.
What else?
Then there's this. Steve Hodel claimed his dad was connected to other unsolved murders, too. Like a pattern that fit with the Black Dahlia case. Oh, and get this. Photos they found in George Hodel's things. Steve was convinced they were of Elizabeth Short.
Photos of the victim. That's pretty damning, isn't it? Did anyone look into it?
They did. But this is where it gets even more complicated. Because as much as Steve Hodel pushed all that evidence, it was circumstantial. No smoking gun, nothing that definitively puts George Hodel there that night.
So suspect, sure. Compelling story with the son. But not enough to close the case. Man, that drive you crazy, those loose ends. But we've got other suspects, right? I mean, this is the Black Dahlia we're talking about.
Oh yeah, plenty more where that came from. Remember, twists and turns everywhere with this one. Another name you hear a lot, Mark Hansen. He owned a nightclub, and it seems like he knew Elizabeth Short.
The nightclub owner, right. Seems like they're always in the mix with these old Hollywood stories. What was the connection there? With Hansen, I mean.
It's tough to say for sure. Lots of rumors, different versions. But some people said Hansen, maybe he came on too strong to Elizabeth Short, made her uncomfortable. So notive, right. But hold on, here's the thing. Cops questioned him, and in the end, they cleared him, said he wasn't involved.
Cleared, yeah, but probably not forgotten. Not in a case like this. Every little thing, every connection, it all gets magnified, doesn't it? But this is where it gets really wild, right? The Black Dahlia, it's not just a simple whodunit. You've got these big, shadowy possibilities, too.
That's the thing. It pulls you in. So many threads. Passion. Was Elizabeth Short involved in something bigger than anyone knew? So many questions and no real answers. Just makes you wonder, you know.
And that's where those conspiracy theories come in. The Cleveland torso murders, maybe the mob was involved. It's a maze.
A maze is right, and people have been lost in it for years. Those Cleveland murders, they were brutal. But more than that, the way the bodies, how they were dismembered, it's similar, really similar to the Black Dahlia. Makes you wonder, could it be the same guy? A serial killer back in the 40s, moving around.
Okay, see, that's the stuff that gives me chills. Just the thought. To think she might have been a victim of a serial killer, it changes how you see everything. But, like you said, all speculation at this point. What about the mob? Hollywood and organized crime, there's a whole history there.
Exactly. And think about it. A young woman, new to the city, trying to make it. It's not crazy to think she might have stumbled into something bad. Crossed the wrong people. Maybe without even realizing it.
And that's what gets me about this whole thing. Maybe, just maybe, Elizabeth Short, she was caught in something way bigger than herself. But if there are so many possibilities, so many people, why is it still unsolved? So many suspects, so many theories. And still, the Black Dahlia, it's a cold case. Why? You would think after all this time.
Time, it's a factor, sure. But honestly, I think this case just shows you how limited investigations were back then. The 40s we're talking about.
Yeah, it's true. You watch those crime shows, they find like, tiny fiber and boom, case closed. What did they even have to work with back then?
Fingerprints, blood typing, that's about it. And even with fingerprints, placing them at the scene. Without the tech they have now, good luck. No DNA analysis. Imagine that. You can't link anyone to the scene, to the victim. Totally different world.
Trying to solve a puzzle, but half the pieces are missing. No wonder it was such a huge deal. Everyone wanted answers, newspapers wouldn't let it go, and the police stuck with what they had, all that pressure.
Exactly. Plus, the media circus around the whole thing. Newspapers printing anything, even rumors. Witnesses bombarded, leads going cold left and right. I can't even imagine how much information, most of it probably useless. How do you even sort through that?
It's like sometimes the system, even if it's trying to do the right thing, it gets in its own way. Plus, time, it doesn't usually make things easier, does it?
Nope. If anything, it's the opposite. People who saw something, they're gone. Memories, they fade. Evidence is gone, or it falls apart. The Black Dahlia, it's almost a perfect example. How something that maybe they could have solved, it becomes this mystery, all because of time.
It's kind of depressing when you think about it like that. But even though there are no answers, the Black Dahlia, she's still everywhere.
Right.
Books, documentaries, even that De Palma movie.
For sure. The Black Dahlia, it's like this cornerstone of true crime. And some of it, yeah, it's the gruesome stuff.
Yeah.
But I think it's more than that. People want to understand that darkness, the stuff underneath, even in a place like Hollywood, all shiny and glamorous.
And you know it adds to it, right? The fact that it happened in Hollywood, all those dreams, all that, I don't know, fakeness. It's like something you'd make up.
Totally. The Black Dahlia, it rips away that pretty surface and shows you what's underneath. All the ambition, the desperation, and the secrets, all those secrets people are trying to hide.
And you almost forget, with all that, there's a real person, a life that ended tragically. Elizabeth Short. She went to Hollywood for something, and then, well, she became part of the dark side.
And that's what gets you thinking, right? How limited the justice system can be. But also, how powerful a good mystery is. Even now, people are still asking questions about the Black Dahlia, still looking for answers.
Oh, I know it. It's one of those cases you keep thinking about it. What if she'd never gone to Hollywood? Would it have been different? Or was it always going to happen this way? Was she always going to be the Black Dahlia, forever known for this horrible thing?
Who knows? Some questions, maybe we'll never know the answers. But maybe that's why we're still drawn to these stories, to these mysteries. They stick around, they make you think about how fragile life is and how much we'll never understand.
And that is a thought to end on. That's our deep dive into the Black Dahlia murder. It's fascinating, it's frustrating, and it reminds you some stories, they never really end.